Okay. It is now the appointed time, and this is the substitute appointed place. And we'll do a roll call and then we'll get going. I am here, Carol is here. Doug is here, Kirk is here, Emily's here, and Kathy's here, and John V. Hill. Do we have anybody online?
No.
Okay, I got it.
Right.
And right. Gee whiz, I probably need to put that down somewhere too.
The one that
Just-
keeps us going.
So you get paid.
Yeah, poor guy.
Okay. Seeing no citizens, I guess there are no citizens requests to speak, and so I guess our. Oh,
There's a citizen.
There's a citizen.
Citizen.
Yeah. Thanks for coming. Yeah, those are extras there, but there's.
Absolutely. How you doing this morning?
Better if I had my computer on, so.
Uh-oh.
I have to make it.
Uh-oh.
That would be the full Monty if they had no cell phone.
That's true.
Hand will start shaking. Withdrawal.
I'll remember that.
And we've already started the meeting. Steve, do you have anything that you'd like to please about it? All right, we're good. So then what we're looking at today is our recommendation.
Don, I'm sorry,
Yes.
may I just comment on citizens?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I just wanted to say that, I didn't get a chance to reach out to all of you on the committee, but I did reach out to John and to Ashley and to Ryan, I believe as well. So Senate Bill 23-291 was going through, I know that's a very busy process. I don't know how closely you all follow that. But there was, just as an example, there were 2 words inserted in that bill, carbon resources under the energy resource planning for utilities. And those 2 words specifically targeted PEGs for early closure.
Whoa.
That was really significant because as you all know, you've been there, that's a state-of-the-art facility. That's what allows us to add renewables onto our system and to continue to provide reliability. And they literally targeted that for closure sometime in the next 5 years with those 2 words.
And it was
And
carbon,
so-
what was the second word again?
Carbon resources.
Resource.
Basically, what it did was it made it more expensive for any carbon resource to be considered than renewables. Basically, I don't want to go into the details, but that's what happened. So that was a specific target to natural gas in the state. And so I just want to point that out to you all because it was a tremendous fight to get some sort of parity. And the way they ended up figuring that out was essentially rather than penalizing them, they agreed to treat them. I'm going to say historically, it has to do with the discount rate and math calculations, but that discount rate they're using will be specific to natural gas prices as opposed to what they were going to do before, which was cap it. And so I just kind of want to, I don't know why I've decided that I thought it was important for you all to know that, but it was a significant fight. That would have been a significant impact to our customers because we would pay for this new shiny asset that's not even completely paid for yet. And in addition to the 400 megawatts of renewable that we're going to add now, it would have required an additional 600 to 650 megawatts, which would have been an investment of an additional $1 billion+. So just to give you all some magnitude for what those decisions could have been during this last legislative
And
session.
you're saying that was not included then?
It was changed.
Oh,
We
okay.
fought
All right.
very hard to get that changed. And there's still gonna be some ramifications to be sure, but I just want this group to know how aggressive I think this legislature is and how it does impact our customers. And so it's important that you all continue to watch
Yep.
legislation specifically. It's not gonna get easier. And I'm not gonna suggest that we don't want to be part of that transition, but we do have to worry about the impact to
Well,
customers.
it's more stranded costs, which costs the customer.
Yep.
Because when you say we have to pay, you're saying we have to pay.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
My impression, John, and maybe you can address this, is that a whole lot of that bill is guidance or direction to the PUC. The PUC has to issue rules, PUC has to look at this, study that. And I don't know if what you're referring to comes under that category, or is it a side?
So it is a bit of a side to that, because what they specifically did is said, when you do resource planning and you look at different resources, you use a discount rate. And basically with the discount rate, what happens is the higher the number, the lower the cost, right? It's a net present value calculation. And so what they were saying is carbon resources had to be tied to inflation, whereas non-carbon resources could be whatever discount rate you want, whatever they would see as suitable. And what that really means is they were trying to say, here's this, there's a carbon penalty, essentially.
I was gonna say, you're weighting things differently as far
Correct.
from the source.
Correct. And so Emily, that wasn't a study. That was like, in the future, when you plan, this is how we're gonna do it.
And then you said that they then changed that.
They did. What they said is, we will now index that discount rate for carbon resources to some fuel index, some long-term fuel index. So there still has to be interpreted. They have to figure that out, to your point about rulemaking, but at least they're gonna take a little bit more thoughtful, realistic approach to the cost of those carbon resources.
I love the way, no offense, the legislatures, they do as best they can, but this is a topic, look at all of us sitting at this table for as long as we have, still learning, and it's like they became experts in like a month and a half. And that irritates the heck out
They
of me.
know they're not, but that doesn't necessarily stop the process.
Yeah.
I mean, is that a fair way? You could say that about any topic. They know they're not,
Yeah.
but it doesn't stop
Well, but
them
they listen
passing
to
hundreds of bills.
lobbyists too, I think, is,
Absolutely. Of course.
it's a
Yeah.
big thing.
Not the right
so-
ones.
Well, it depends on your point of view,
Yeah.
and some of these things seem awfully short term. I mean, 5 years seems like, oh, when I was a kid, 5 years sound like forever, but in this landscape, it's like, tomorrow.
I mean, we just built it and put it
Yeah.
online in 2010. It's only been 13 years. It's a 40-year asset. They want to retire in 18. It's really hard on customers.
And
So
why-
thank you for letting me share that with you. I just wanted to give that perspective.
And why did you build it? Because he told you couldn't use coal anymore. You had to go to natural gas. So you go to natural gas. Now they're telling you in 5 years, you gotta get rid of that.
Yeah,
That's why.
and the city is now a member of Action
Mine's getting
22. by the
Oh,
way.
excellent.
And I'm
Good.
the rep,
I'm
so
glad to hear that. Then you and I will be seeing each other a little bit
hopefully, yeah,
more.
yeah.
And Action 22 is actually, they were super good for our communities, not just ours. I mean, they were fantastic. Sarah Blackhurst was a loud voice at the Capitol this past legislative session, so nod to her. Anyway, thank you.
Sure. Sure. And what I would say is that the legislature continues to work to increase our electricity costs
Yeah,
while putting a knife in the back of reliability. Good grief, where are those megawatts gonna come from?
Well, let's not lose sight of some of the other things in the bill that I think
Well,
will
we're
benefit
just
us.
talking one thing right now.
We
And let's
can
not.
talk more than one, that's
Yes, we
okay.
can, but the point is, you have a bad part of the bill, it's a bad part. You can't put any dressing on it.
If I understood correctly, that was removed. The rest of the bill is.
No, what was not removed is the planning guidance. Was the planning guidance, you interrupted me first. So you don't interrupt me, I interrupted you, for pity's sakes,
I didn't say that, John. I said, I think it's worth looking at some of the other pieces of the bill. And I did pass information along periodically to the community or to the committee about that.
My bottom line remains. This is a bill that will continue to increase our costs while it's putting a knife in the back of reliability.
The part that will help reduce costs over time is determining if the PUC follows along this. Determining what gets included in race and what doesn't. Advertising, political costs, some of those kinds of things that may over time change and help reduce costs,
And
at
that's a
least
good
in a
point.
marginal way.
Good
And that's a
point.
fair point. Okay, so now we're on to our recommendation documents. And Kirk, thanks for putting that together. So has everybody had a chance to look at that?
Yep.
Any comments or?
A few little things, I think overall it's really good.
Yeah, I didn't have any different recommendations that didn't get included. I thought this was good.
So the city, did we all come to the conclusion that the city should contract? The way I understood, if a company wanted to come in here, they could to do a study on their own choice.
I think what we had talked about was just the analysis of the system. And I get, it's probably important that we distinguish what kind of study we're talking about. We're not talking about a full-fledged study like Pueblo did. We're just talking about an analysis of the system, and I
Correct.
think the council is interested in doing that.
Yeah,
We'll
and
see.
ultimately, I think that what the council is waiting for is for the recommendation of this committee before they move forward.
Right, thank you.
And so we've got, let's look at let's discuss and look at the first four. Further research and study. Contract with a third party, that's the poles and wires assessment. This number two, the city should fully explore all options to partner with a third party utility company to further explore the feasibility of municipalization of a municipalization option. And number three, an independent evaluation of the costs and process to municipalize should be conducted by a qualified third party. And a potential third party utility partner. The analysis should include short and long-term budgets, plan outlining the steps to municipalize, as well as identifying upper limits for cost. And we have a recommendation later that the city should comply with, that's number 5 under ongoing. The city should comply with 1316 of the code. And there's actually, this is a place where actually we probably should put in a charter reference, because there's requirements in the charter for municipalization. And so we probably should get that there.
You don't mean instead of, you mean in addition to.
That's correct. I did not bring my charter with me, but I do have that, and I do have electronic.
So are we gonna skip over to that or just go
What?
back to, I'm just
Oh.
trying to figure out where.
Oh,
we-
well, all
Because I
right,
have
okay.
more
It just
Sure.
came to his remembrance that needed to be done when he was talking about that.
And then we have number 4, prior to conducting the referendum, and any change of electric provider. Comprehensive study results of municipalization proposal should be thoroughly discussed with the community. And suggest that educational outreach before municipalization shows up on the ballot. So you have some comments, Emily, about that?
No, I just wanted to clarify whether we were jumping to more discussion on 5, because I have some other things on 5, but no, I think.
No, I'm just using that as an example, that if we're referencing our city code, we probably should reference the charter in number 2.
Right, right.
That's an important point there, I think. So any other comments there on that first section for the research?
Comment.
Yeah.
So who would evaluate the study? Do we have anybody in the city, or do we have to hire somebody else to make sure that the study was done thoroughly and correctly?
Which I
So
can talk
which
about in number
which study?
4.
You mean if we
Yeah.
hired a third party, we would
Yes.
need somebody to analyze that?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
number 2, you're talking about
Yeah.
number 2.
I am.
City should fully explore all options with a third party utility. And so I think number 3 kind of covers that. That if we got a third party utility that wanted to further explore municipalization, that we would do an independent evaluation of that. And I think that's where kind of the charter comes in, because there's all kinds of hoops you have to jump through in the charter prior to any municipalization decision, really.
I guess what I'm asking is who would do the independent?
That's part of, I think what you're saying is who's gonna analyze the analysis.
In
Is that
other
what-
words, if a company comes in that wants Canyon City's business and they do an evaluation of the fit,
Yeah,
so
One thing, maybe
Uh,
you're making the wrong assumption there. You're assuming that who's gonna do the analysis is also gonna be the one that's gonna become quote unquote the utility.
not necessarily,
Okay,
Well,
no, not necessarily. I mean, you could carry it forever. Who's gonna evaluate this? Who's gonna evaluate them or whatever? But if you have a party coming in that wants to provide service to Canyon City and they do a study, how can we make sure that the study is
So, Doug,
good,
I think
for lack of a better word?
if we ever get to that point, the city's gonna have to hire its own experts as third parties.
And
Yeah,
that would be
they'll be their own, we would have to hire our own consultants to help us walk through that process.
Okay, so you're gonna hire a consult or a company, whether it be a possible future provider or an independent to do the study, which would be expensive. Then you're gonna have to hire another company to come in and evaluate their study.
In the case of the, you know, where we're hiring a consultant to come in and do the analysis, the study, I think you only have to hire a consultant if it is another energy provider. Because the consultant that you're hiring to do that analysis, if it's not a third energy company, or another energy provider, you know, that person, you're hiring them to be your expert.
Okay, well, I would love, every time you hire somebody out there, it's going to affect the budget.
sure it is.
We do that a lot
So-
already. We hire consultants on things already.
I'm sure you
There's
probably,
a process.
I'm sure you probably do.
What the thing is that this would be something that the city owns. The city would have the independent evaluation to be able to compare if there was another company out there. Cause you're gonna compare they're gonna do their own analysis if there is somebody out there. And so this way you've got the comparisons to make sure you're looking at apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Okay, so are we gonna vote on these
Who's we?
well, isn't he's on this committee?
committee?
Oh.
The-
I'd like to
the-
go through it first.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing. The, and discussing, and so let's talk about the process. So if there's a particular, first off, these are gonna be our recommendations as a committee. Okay, and so, you know, there's a couple of different ways we can handle that. If we're all in agreement, with the recommendations, we can just say, this is what we think we should recommend to the council. We could vote on each recommendation to whether it include it as written or not. Or we could edit them, so that if there's a concern that we, as a committee, try to address that concern. If an individual committee member felt the concern wasn't addressed sufficiently, then there could be essentially a minority report that we would send to council that says, well, on this recommendation, you know, one or two or three, you know, members of the committee had a different view or something.
Okay, you said if we all voted for it, I don't think there needs to necessarily always be a unanimous. vote.
No, of course not.
No,
we-
Majority vote,
We agree.
okay.
But there could be, you know, in a case where there's a substantial different view or,
Mhm.
you know, something like that. There's the opportunity for a dissenting opinion, essentially, you know, courts do that all the time. So there's that possibility too. Okay, But you know, part of what, so I didn't bring my computer that's hooked up to my iCloud, the cloud. But the city charter does have provisions in it that are actually pretty onerous. And that you have to, boxes you have to check off before you can take a municipalization decision to the electorate, right? And so I think it's, I don't know, what do y'all think with that? Is that, maybe we should, I'm not sure how long that section is. I think it's maybe a half a page
In the charter,
in the charter.
we could bring that on, I mean, we have internet access here, we could bring it up through Canyon City.
I guess we could do that, huh?
Yeah, just email it to everybody or something.
It's pretty easy to find.
On a Monday, I purposely left the new iPad at home. So so much I could handle.
You turn it your kid can't be.
Okay.
Every time I think I'm out of having to have new technology, huh?
I don't understand the old yet.
Yeah.
Don't give me anything new.
I started out with key punch and sorters. That's kind of where I left it.
My first job out of college, somebody in the office where I was did key punching and slowing down.
That's what my
It was
summer
very
job with
noisy.
public service was
Yeah,
in
yeah, I did
college.
that. And then,
Just send the section to everybody,
like
John.
Lotus or 1, 2, 3, and
Sure.
stuff like that came on, I died and gone to heaven, a
Maybe
spreadsheet that
just put
added.
it up on the
up the
screen.
columns.
Screen, I don't think we need to see ourselves.
Instead of this.
Is that, or is that gonna be?
As good looking as you're up there, Ryan, in the big screen.
Way too much of me.
And add on sales up and they're supposed to come out the same number, like,
Check register.
oh, worse, and much.
Some of us don't do that.
Yeah. I depend on. Either online banking, I say,
I just sort of, every once in a while I find a mistake.
oh, yeah, I
It's in
do
my
too.
paper.
Well, it's always my mistake, let's put it that way.
That's section 13 or something.
It's Article 10, I believe.
Article 10.
I have that thing. Going back to the days.
Franchise and public utilities. Okay.
Well, it takes a lot of driving to run the city.
Yes, it did.
Way too much.
Yeah.
It's all for your protection. Is it?
So the beginning of the requirements are there in section 3, I believe.
Oh,
Oh, that's an ordinance. That's an ordinance, yeah.
Is it a little premature to put all of that in there? I mean,
Well, this is gonna be so are you familiar with those provisions?
I'm not.
Are
Are you talking about in the chart?
in the charter, what we have to do to municipalize?
I am not.
Yeah, me too. I'm not either. And so what I'm thinking is that,
Just a reference point at this
Right.
point.
That's what-
yes,
yeah,
and maybe we
that's what-
attach it as an addendum or something like
That's an
that.
idea, yeah.
Maybe we could do that.
say, okay, find out exactly.
because we really haven't, as a committee, discussed a
Oh,
whole
no,
lot.
we're
of it,
not,
you know,
that's
this-
above our pay grade, anyway.
Well, at this point.
And just refer the council to that section, you
Right.
know, so they know where to go to get their information. So,
Okay, so it's section 8. Approval of acquisition of public utility. No public utility shall be acquired unless the complete
Those are
plan
military
for acquisition
subdivisions.
be embodied in an ordinance adopted by
oh,
council
yeah.
and approved by electors. The adoption approval shall be deemed, okay, blah, blah, blah. There's and then 9 is the requirements of the ordinance. Description of the property, that's a requirement. Purchase price, how you pay for the whole thing. Any obligations or bonds. Bond information, a whole bunch of that. Kind of a taxpayer's bill of rights there. Taxes required to be leveled annually to provide such funds to pay for those bonds. Bonds, a lot of bond information. But we also have to, so if it's just an outright purchase. And it's gonna cost the city money through taxes, that has to be identified. If it's a kind of a pay-go type thing where you buy the asset and then you use that revenues of the asset to pay things off, then you have to, and there's just, we have to provide the cost of operation and maintenance of the facility. So there's a lot of requirements there.
And then you jump down to number 10, which is another thing that it has to. Will fix the rates, what the
So,
utility actually will
That's,
do,
but
their responsibilities.
I think
Yes.
we just
Yeah,
note the charter by reference.
Well, what
I don't
we've
think
got-
As a committee, we need to put that.
we've got three sections there. Yeah, I'm thinking that what I'm thinking is that, okay, I got my council hat on here, is that it would be good to have that, maybe just those three sections as an addendum.
Section 8, 9, and 10,
Yeah,
And.
and that's Article 10.
that's, yes.
correct.
Okay.
Would you want to put that up under the further research and study?
So,
You know, those,
what I would do is just on number 3, say. The provisions of the charter applicable to. Municipalization are attached as appendix A or something like that.
Yeah.
8, 9, and 10. And that way it makes it complete for a citizen also who wants to kind of understand this process. And
what did you say again, John?
8, 9, and 10.
No, but how did you word that?
So I think that if we include this, it just, it's kind of a transparency thing and a completeness thing, so that if a citizen wants to read this document, they've got, they don't have to do all the gyrations we just did.
Yeah, if they can find it on the city website, they go to it.
And you can understand it. In the third place.
Sometimes it seems like that's too much of a problem for Facebook users.
You think?
Kirk, I'll send you the link to the website, so the link to the
Oh,
charter can
perfect.
also be referenced.
Yeah, that'd be good.
And you can just copy that and put it in a document. Okay, any other comments on further research and study? Part of our recommendations. I'm good with those recommendations. I think that, by including what the charter requires, then it's more comprehensive of what we're telling city council they would have to do. Because we're saying, analyze this, analyze that. Those are also analytical requirements. Okay, any other discussion on that? Okay, then the next section, Black Hills Energy. City should not place a Black Hills franchise renewal proposal on the ballot while we're exploring options for more affordable power. Myself, I think that's pretty restrictive. There are good and sufficient reasons to have a franchise with the appropriate provisions in it, which are off ramps. The franchise proposed back in 2017 had a 5-year life. We would have already hit that 5-year life if that had been adopted. But so I think that one to me is a little bit restricted.
I think so. If we have a franchise in place, I think it would, for the most part, prevent the city from some of the conversations that the city has had and would want.
Yep.
Well, the other part of that is that section 7 of our, document here does list all of the things that are required to be in a franchise. And so some of those are not enforceable because we're assuming some of the requirements of this section 7 allow the city or require the city to assume powers that are PUC powers. And so that those are not enforceable. There's some unenforceable requirements in here or a direction in here. Excuse me. But it seems to me that if we had a franchise that included all of the reservations to the city in section 7, as well as appropriate off-ramps that such a franchise might be in the best interest of the city. And that's kind of a case-by-case evaluation. And so a blanket recommendation that don't even consider it city, until you've explored all the options, that will never happen. This is an ongoing, the landscape continues to change and will continue to change. So to me, what I would say is the city should not place a Black Hills Energy franchise renewal proposal on the city ballot until all of the requirements of the branch of the charter have been met.
I think that leaves out, I mean, does the charter have a provision about seeking more affordable power? I assume it does not. So we're, we're leaving out, though, if we do that, we're leaving out the whole purpose of why this committee
It
exists.
seems to me too, that we lose a little bit of our leverage.
Absolutely.
It's kind of like, I realize that we're a small grain of sand in their overall service territory, but it still puts a check mark, because theoretically, Black Hills, are you still using city right away for your where, they could be going out there and having to get their own right away because there's no franchise. I know that sounds onerous and that's probably not gonna happen, but it's one of those that gives again leverage. So you need to think about what's best for the city. And if what you're saying outweighs just a couple of things I've just said, then okay, but I'm not sure I see the overall advantage to the city.
So essentially the bottom line for you is that the city would lose too much leverage to engage in a franchise.
I think so, and it could discourage anybody else who's interested in working with us outside.
Right.
And so it's just one of those I just don't see it as being the best solution at the moment. And I realize the city is losing the quote unquote 3% right now, which does add up to a pretty good little chunk of change. But I'm not sure in the scope of things that is really as important as the overall goal that we had in mind.
And as we noted, that's a tax on the customer.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. I can be I can hear other reasons and I can be changed, but I'm not hearing them right now.
So maybe the recommendation from the committee should be that this should not place Black Hills Energy franchise renewal proposal on the city ballot due to loss of potential leverage with Black Hills, as well as
Potential
Well,
suitors.
so that's kind of my point. Maybe we should say what, maybe we should wordsmith that a little bit
I
then.
kind of like the more general statement, still exploring options.
Yeah,
Because if we get to,
playing your hand, it seems
Yeah,
like by,
exactly.
explaining why.
yeah, I think, and you know, if we get to the point, if and when we get to the point where the city says, okay, we've explored every possible option, we're done in this decade or whatever, then, you know, then that's something that we look at again. And, you know, I keep thinking in the back of my mind too, that we have a public out there to be responsible to, the public that voted nearly 2/3 to not renew the franchise. So I like the general wording, that's.
I think that's one of those statements that can be tweaked as we go along, but I think where we sit right now, I like the general statement.
Okay,
So
okay,
I may be way off base here. But rather than franchise. I realize the city gets money for a franchise. But they could also get money in either MOU or an agreement. Rather than a franchise. It's just changing the words a little bit. But anyway, that's my thought process, an agreement in which maybe Black Hills would pay a stipend. Whatever, and that agreement would have verifiable outcomes.
Is that something, Doug, that you envision the public voting on?
Not any more so than I would envision them vote on a franchise at this point.
Well, the franchise we're required to vote on.
Right.
That's why I wondered if you.
I guess- I'm stuck on that word stipend. Are you saying that Black Hills would pay the city?
The Black Hills would possibly pay the city in understanding, just like they would a franchise.
Well, you realize that franchise comes on the customer's bill. It's the customer that's paying the franchise fee.
Fee. Right.
So you're saying, let's leave the customer out of it and make
Well, I
Black
would-
Hills pay. I like that.
Is somebody gonna go for that?
Just an idea.
I know, that's good. That would. Yeah, no franchise, and by the way, you're gonna pay us. I like that a lot.
No, that agreement or in an MOU would be for a certain period of time.
Yeah, okay,
That sounds like what number 2 is trying to get at, correct?
Right.
yeah.
And with number 2, just, I wonder if we would need to
Yeah.
define what we mean by interim agreement about what?
Yeah,
Yeah, you have to be very careful with that one, because any agreement that looks and smells like a franchise, you're in violation of the charter.
That's why it was put allowable, desirable, or beneficial.
Mhm.
And it says could, that doesn't say would.
Right.
It could investigate if.
Yeah.
You know, if you
And
wanted
it's
to.
at this time.
Yeah, at this
What's
time, at this time.
It's a- What we don't know.
Cause that was what I gathered from our last meeting,
Mhm.
when we talked about that a little bit.
I just,
You
and I
missed it.
just wonder what that would be. I mean, what would it be about? You can imagine a range of things. Is it simply about right of way use? Or is it something much bigger? It can't be about things like cost to the customer, so.
yeah, it's kind of like, why the heck would Black Hills think about, so agree to some, it's gotta be a somewhat of a win-win for them at this point. And
so it's that's, we've talked about, brought up several different issues. One of them is a franchise fee, in addition to a sales tax appropriate? Or, are they, and that's a discussion we haven't had, and that's a discussion that's actually more appropriate in front of council, I guess. In terms of how that shakes out. So. I'll tell you what, what I don't like about the first statement is the open-ended nature of that. There needs to be, I think that we should set some goalposts for the council to say, okay, if you, once you get to this point, then franchise may be appropriate. And maybe that point is when, options for more affordable power have been exhausted.
I'm thinking that the legislature and the PUC are both in the process of moving those goalposts, so I'm not sure if we want to use that as our benchmark.
That's my earlier point, is that the energy landscape is gonna continue to change and evolve.
Yeah.
And will never be done. And so in a way, that's recommending this committee exists forever. Okay, and so I'm not happy with that. I don't like that, and I think that we need to work on this wording. To say, to set some goalposts that when we get there, we know we're there, and then, okay, maybe it's time to select the franchise.
And at that point, possibly cut off any future things that may come up, because we all know the legislature, those guys are up there to make more laws, to make, just, in my opinion, make it more difficult for us. But
We can't tie the hands of the future council, though.
no, I'm not trying to. I mean, this committee looking there, I think there needs to be an endpoint, because we'll never, in my opinion, we'll never reach a point where the legislature is not gonna come up with anything new.
Since the goal all along has been to achieve affordable power
Right,
for the government and for the community, why isn't that our endpoint? Why isn't that the goalpost?
Because-
If, for example, if somehow, some way, we achieved rates comparable to Excel or some other marker, maybe that's the endpoint. I mean, that's what the goal has been all along, was to achieve more affordable power.
And if you
well, we
can't-
all
and if
know
you can't
Excel
get-
hasn't had the most affordable power.
Yeah, they just
Well, we
ask-
have
no,
the
and they're
chart.
just,
We have the
asking for a
chart
big
that
rate
shows
increase.
what they're.
But if you can't get a third party and you can't get something that is affordable in the first 3 or 4 points of this, the discussion we're having right now is over.
Moot. I agree.
I mean, it's,
Until. some
until you
higher-
go through this first 4 steps and determine, hey, you know, we can't do it, then.
Yeah.
Then you're at a
Yeah.
point where it's all done.
And then I think the consideration of a franchise is still another discussion. And maybe it's a committee like this that would need to advise the council on the pros and cons of having a franchise. So, you know, it's just, I see that as a
Well,
separate.
And I think before you would do that, you're gonna have to explain, and I think this process will explain to the public what's been going on, because the public said, okay, we voted against the franchise. Why should we vote for it now? What's
Mhm.
changed?
Yeah,
So I
Yeah.
think there needs to be some
We
communication.
have saved you 3% for the last year and a half. I'm
But,
being
yeah,
facetious in a sense,
Yeah.
but it's
Well,
like,
that is.
but I do agree that, you know, I agree there needs to be a line in the sand. But I think that line can be achieved by doing, like you just said, 1 through 4. If we've gotten to the point to where if for some reason the council says not only no, but hell no, we're not gonna spend any money for an analysis, that's gonna kind of put a
yeah.
little bit of a damper in our plans. And so I think once you get through 1 through 4, depending on where we're at, then I think that is kind of where we're at, as far as being able to move anywhere forward. But I may be wrong.
Then you're gonna have to go to the point of, you know, with our current provider, how do we work with them and try to improve things
And what are things? I mean, the franchise is set with this, and this. Can you add, okay, we're gonna have a party in the park every July to that?
You can have
know?
side agreements if they're willing to
Okay.
do it. You're darn right. I mean, it's
Okay,
been
all
done.
right.
It's not considered the franchise, but it's also, if you want
Okay.
us to propose this franchise, we're also gonna have this, and this.
Right, right.
which
And
you-
those will be valued as to the benefit to the customer.
And to the city, yes.
Yeah.
So,
Right, right.
So could this say the city shall not place a franchise on the ballot until the above four bullets have been resolved
we're exhausted.
or exhausted?
I would like to just stick with the current wording, and that gives the council.
I'm not happy with that.
Well, I think council is, we have a committee recommendation and then the council gets to decide what they want to do.
I'm a member of the committee.
Really?
And I'm not happy with that.
Right. Well, we could have a minority report, that's for sure.
Well, or we can vote on this particular wording on this particular. And if it's tied, what do we do?
Well,
What,
you could
Do
also
you
just say that you're not gonna have it on the ballot at this time. I mean, if that,
Yeah,
if that,
Yeah,
if the end of it, because we're talking about right now, and
Yeah.
Yeah,
at this time, we're just not gonna have it, and
leave it at that.
going through 1 through 4 is pretty much a combination of what she's saying there, because it's looking at, can we find a way to get better rates? So if we just eliminate the,
and ballot issues go on when in August, is that the final date? that- Yeah, is there
council,
gonna be anything that changes drastically?
Well, I'll tell you, I don't
between the
agree
end
with
of
it
May-
going on this
No,
ballot.
no,
Well,
we're not ready.
At, the-
We haven't
no way.
at
applied
this
with the
time,
charter.
I think,
At this
Is there-
time, yeah,
yeah,
because really the summation of what 1 through 4 is talking about is there a better option out there with rates?
yeah, so just to delete.
this time
while the
period?
city is
Yeah,
still
this time.
exploring Options, delete that
Excuse me,
one
I'll get
section,
water.
or
What's that?
delete that one section
This-
while the,
Yeah,
I think that's open-ended as well, but it's
well, it's
kind
talking
of a line
about,
in the sand as far as this time,
talking,
right now.
yeah, because we really can't,
Yeah.
we're not prophets.
Right.
We can't foresee the future. So it's, at this time, this is a recommendation at this time.
Because if we're going to recommend that these things, 1 through 4, take place fairly soon or in a, a short-term time frame, then that definitely goes along with that. Leaving off the rest of that sentence. Okay.
so, John, would you like some type of vote today on this?
No, we
Okay.
don't necessarily need to take a vote today. What we're gonna do, we're making some changes to the document. We got some additions. We're wordsmithing this a little bit. At the end of the day, we can decide what we want to do. What's the next step? So I think we go through the process and then determine what we're gonna do. So I'm good with. Boy, it must be that smoke.
It is, and outside yesterday, it went in coughing my head off, so, yeah.
I've been smelling smoke in this room, either that. or-
I don't know. Now that you mentioned it,
It's
I
our
think I
brain.
smell it right
That's what
now.
it is, our brain.
what's that, of the smoke?
Smoke.
Not mine's propped up, so I'm not sure.
Okay. So then with that change, we're good with 1 and 2, or perhaps the exception of Emily.
Well, don't speak for me.
I'm not
Actually,
asking.
what I would say,
I'm
but
asking.
I still think that with number 2, we should clarify what the meaning of number 2 is. I don't, in other words, if I'm a council member that hasn't been part of this discussion, I wouldn't know what we're referring to by interim agreement. I mean, whether that means give an example, I'm not sure. I don't.
Just use the word negotiated in place of interim, no.
Because I just would want to know about what.
Yeah.
And be able to clarify for council that we're not talking about a franchise, and so what are we talking about?
So you
I mean,
could,
I would leave it off if it were just up to me, because I'm not sure.
John,
you could refer back to us if this group remembers, we made an inquiry about some sort of negotiated agreement, an MOU of sorts that where we identified mutual items of mutual benefit. That's an offer that we made to the city that was, not right now. Is as I recall, when that ask went to council and it came to this committee, so that's something that you could reconsider.
That definitely would be in my opinion, a good starting point here to go back and review that.
If I remember correctly, John, that was something that's kind of like rules of engagement for different scenarios, things like that.
So the example I shared was one that we did in Eagle, and it was actually just more of when we can find common ground, things that we find common ground on, and it could be things like, our approach to legislation. Are we gonna agree on 100% of everything? No, but when we have common ground, how do we advocate for our customers and your citizens appropriately? How do we make sure that we're leveraging the relationship, to the extent that we can to make the best outcomes for customers? That's kind of what that, when we went there, that direction with Eagle, and it's a gas territory, but it was about not outrightly banning natural gas. It was about being thoughtful about keeping people's choices on the table. It was about, how do you, with this piece of legislation, as they banned line extensions in gas for natural gas, providers in the future. And that was one that I would imagine that they had some conversation about. So I can't give you specifics, but that was kind of that was the idea of it. Is even, I'll give the example of when we did our electric resource plan. My understanding from certain people was that there was a question about the enforceability, about whether if a community were to ask for something specific, like, yeah, we're on board as long as these resources end up in our county or our city. And this is not from this group, but that there was some question about whether or not that was enforceable. What I heard is absolutely it's enforceable if that's what you ask for and that's what's agreed upon through that process. So, that was an example where a particular county was trying to secure revenues for their
I
county.
was gonna say, you're looking at like tax.
Exactly. If you're gonna build a
taxable
200
assets or
megawatt
stuff.
facility, we'd like it to be in these boundaries so that we benefit directly.
Mhm.
And there was a question, is that enforceable? Well, through
Yeah,
the RFP process, absolutely it is. There's a line item that says there's, 30% of this evaluation goes to other things. Absolutely, that could have been included, but ultimately they didn't request it because they didn't think it was enforceable. So those are examples, just
Well, what about on this number 2? Say with, and don't write this down yet.
I'm just writing some things down
Yeah,
so
okay,
that I
okay.
can remember what we
Sure.
should discuss.
With legal assistance, the city should reevaluate the suggestion by Black Hills of an interim agreement.
Should or could?
could.
You want,
Should.
I wouldn't say should unless we want to look at that again as a committee, because I don't remember the content well enough to say should.
Well, we just heard, essentially, that's what John said is what the proposal is.
Right, I would say could is a better word there.
Can I bring something up? Probably most of you won't appreciate this. But one of our first meetings, the lady from Boulder said, when everything is all washed out, work with your current provider. Now, that lady and her committees have been through this process for years. But why, hold on. Why do we think we can't take advice of others that have been through the process?
Because that's only one other. And their goal was totally different than what our goal is. Their
They
goal was,
wanted renewable.
they wanted all renewables. And they ended up getting all those renewables.
Yeah,
It just took a little longer and it
yeah.
cost the city $250 million.
Can we do that? Can we afford that?
We're not talking
not
about
doing
doing
that.
that. We want to lower what we've got now.
Right, I understand.
So I'm just saying the goals are totally different. And so the outcome is gonna be hopefully different.
Okay, well, I still stand by my statement.
And I understand it doesn't, I don't think any one of us is, we do have desire for lower costs. It also
I
doesn't
agree.
mean that we have totally said, I think we just want to explore options
Mhm.
and make sure that we have the best available to us here
At the time.
at the time.
And so the question before us right now is, should one of those options be revisit the Black Hills?
I think it would be smart, because I don't think any one of us can frankly remember a specific item on there. So, you know, I don't know if that should necessarily be a recommend. I'm thinking that we as the committee should reevaluate that before we make a
Yeah.
recommendation to the council. That would be my suggestion.
Or we didn't go into it.
So if there's something in writing, a document that we need to. take
Read-
another look
yeah.
at, then-
Yeah, but I don't think it's necessarily for the council to at this stage, because
Right.
we're a little bit more informed than they are as to just everything involved in this.
If we left number 2 out, we're not really tying the council's hands, because they can always do that regardless of
Yeah.
what they decide to. That's the way I look at it.
So other thoughts on that one? What do you think about that, Carol? Do you think that's what we should
Well, I
keep
think,
that in? there?
I think the freedom for council would, that they could investigate, not that they should, because that puts the onus on us saying, yeah, do it. And I don't think that you necessarily have one, you know, before analyzing what Black Hills offered again. And as I remember, it was, not that substantive, I can't say that word.
Substitute.
That word, yeah, it was not, it wasn't like we're gonna lower your rates by 5% next year. I mean, it was, yeah, like you said, John, it was, let's discuss this, but it wasn't anything concrete. That's the word.
So does that mean number 2 in or out?
Well, if there's only a 1, what's the point of that section, you know?
It's an important point.
Well,
It is.
yeah, right, it is, but well, yeah, I think we should leave it in, but. You know, like you said, let us look at the document again.
I don't think we have a document.
Yes,
There was.
It was a sample, there was a sample
Well, I
document.
don't know
from
what the
Eagle,
word was. A document to me is written words on a page, so, you
No,
know,
I
there
think
were
you're right.
those.
It had Black Hills.
Yeah, it did, yeah.
I just think at the point, if we're saying that the franchise should not be pursued right now, and then you have, look at an interim agreement, to me, it's kind of confusing, because you're saying, we don't want to have a franchise, but let's look at an interim agreement. It's like,
Yeah,
To me, that,
it just
I think
confuses
just number
the
one,
issue just a little
it
bit.
implies that it is somehow related to the franchise or would cover what a franchise.
It's just a little confusing to me. If I was reading that and you see that, you know, it's a franchise, we say no.
and they've never heard what I said a few minutes ago about having agreements outside of the actual
Mhm.
franchise. So I think there could be some confusion created by presenting that to the whole council. So I would say leave number 1 in, and we as a committee reread the proposal and go from there.
That's
So eliminate number 2, except for us.
But when will we present this to council, Brian?
That's yet to be determined.
Yes, we do.
Another line in the sand.
What are the possibilities?
We're looking at another committee meeting, that would probably be July or August.
No, if we want to present.
At
a
a city
document,
council meeting.
or at a general government, some type of.
Yeah,
city council.
committee meeting.
That's-
Yeah,
Yeah, that, okay.
yeah, so that would be July or August for general,
July or August.
probably gonna be August at this point.
For either one of those.
Okay,
We've been meeting for what, a year and a half at least,
Almost 2.
2, okay? I think we need to come to some sort of a conclusion in the relative near future. But I don't think we should push this thing just to push.
Okay, so our goal is to review, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning energy options for the city. One of the options is a franchise.
Mhm.
And so what is our recommendation? That is, so it's just one, is it just one? at
To
this
me,
time?
that's all we need,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
If that's where we are for now.
It's either that or we request additional opportunities presented by Black Hills. Let's, do they have other things that they've been holding back? Let's hear what the hell they got, so I don't know.
So the problem is there's some lines here we have to be cognizant of and respect, and one of them is that we don't have negotiating power,
True.
so, but having said that, that doesn't mean that if we were to evaluate this as a committee, this being a potential agreement, some type of side agreement, or an interim agreement, whatever we wanted to term it as. If we want to pursue that, in essence, it kind of becomes a recommendation for Black Hills that they go back to and get something with a little more flesh on the bone, perhaps. So I'm not sure where if this takes us anywhere productive or not.
Well, I'm
But-
still worried what Kathy said a few minutes ago, before I am, where if there's something previously submitted that the committee should look at again, that's great. I don't think we need to add anything under this section.
I think we should have 1 and 2. Under Black Hills Energy, that's where we're at, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so Doug,
and-
would you suggest any kind of definition for the phrase interim agreement? Do you have anything that you think should be added there?
Well, I think everything, has to have some form of an ending point.
Okay, but I'm.
But
asking
how
about-
long? Are you asking me how long?
No,
for an
I'm
interim
asking you.
What
if-
does interim
If
agreement
we
mean?
keep number
Oh.
2 in, do you have a suggestion about clarifying what we mean by interim agreement? That's all.
I mean, frankly,
I can-
they're required to service, so what else?
They are,
And the lights are on. We're still working with them. They're out
Right.
there.
right.
So what beyond would you think that we could ask them?
It says here, if we leave it as is, it said good, could, not should.
Well, what about, instead of saying an interim agreement, saying, should evaluate, potential areas of collaboration with Black Hills? I mean, that's really what Black Hills was suggesting, is that we get together, collaborate, see if there's some way that, some words we can put down in a document
Mhm.
that covers mutually beneficial, areas of interest.
I don't have an issue.
I guess part of my problem is that there was other things that they were willing, why the hell haven't they come to us?
Exactly.
Be, proactive. Poor John's been here for as long as we have. He has heard everything.
Right.
And so it's kind of like, if there were other things they were holding back, I think they would have brought them forward. But frankly, as I remember that proposal that John did, I felt like, I think I kind of halfway dismissed it because I didn't see anything substantive.
That word.
That word
concrete, if you wanna
in
use
there
that.
either,
Yeah.
so I'm kind of thinking that it seems to me as if. Sure, we can spend some more of Corey's time or whomever, to do it, but I don't think they've got anything else they're willing to come to the table for. Hell, they won't even paint my stupid streetlights up in Dawson. So
John's here, he hears us.
I know he hears it.
Okay, He's not the bottom line, I don't think,
No,
but he can carry this message up as to how we're feeling. And go from there.
And I'm sure he has. Thank you for being here.
yeah,
Okay, so where does that leave us with two then?
ouch.
So you think out, you think out,
I'm out unless there's further definition.
so I'm good with that. We'll take that one out.
John, to go back to your previous question, so August 9th is open if you want to take it to general government. If the committee is intent on having, if the committee's intent is to have council vote on this, we can take it to any city council meeting as soon as the document's ready.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's what I.
Okay, so I don't, do we want to ask council to vote on this or do we want to provide it as a recommendation? These are our recommendations. These are the committee's findings.
Well, I think we submit it to council and that's their decision. These
Yeah.
are our recommendations.
Recommendation.
And I think
And I
the
don't-
question is whether they would want to have it at a committee meeting like general government so that they can have
More
more
discussion.
discussion without a vote.
And that might be something that
That's a
you,
good point.
that you ask the council members, would you like it just to?
It's like for them a chance to say,
Recommendation.
what the hell were you thinking? And it allows us to have just that.
It covers a lot of the stuff that we talked about at the last meeting.
And their meeting could either be with or without us, whatever they feel most comfortable with.
It's an open meeting, so yeah.
Okay.
So that's what we're shooting for then is August
I
9th.
think that's a good idea, and then we can at least have that placeholder.
Okay. So that takes us to ongoing assistance of the Energy Franchise Committee. And number one is. And we have 7 altogether. Before we get to ongoing. Are there recommendations that Steve has? That we want to include in kind of the. Recommendation section above. I kind of look at it as, one is, ongoing assistance is where we can continue to do good things and perhaps city council wants. To consider those things, whereas the other ones are actually concrete things that. The city can be doing, like, getting the third party evaluation of poles and wires or all that kind of stuff.
So, John,
Mhm.
you can, I'm sure you, or Kathy or Emily. Where does council stand on this? Do they expect? Definitely more input from us, ongoing assistance? As his first couple
That's-
words?
That's a question.
I think that's up to council as a whole.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
And
Do
if we
they,
take it to them at the August 9th general government committee, maybe that's part of the discussion there. They won't vote on anything there, but
But we get a sense of council.
Yeah, exactly.
absolutely.
So,
would you say?
so.
Get a sense of,
We
sense
get
of
a
council,
council?
sense of council, yeah.
Well, I got lost. I thought we were gonna move to Steve's, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, that's what, so are there? Okay. Let's discuss Steve's number one, continue exploring possibilities, third-party members.
Or do we want to have that as an appendix? Label that as an appendix.
Let's talk about it, but I think this is part of this dilemma, and we're all very well aware of it, and that is. That some discussions have occurred in city council executive committee that cannot be shared. Some have occurred here, some have occurred in council or vision committee meetings or whatever. And I don't have a solution for that. It is a struggle though, because the public, particularly the public that hasn't attended these meetings or any others, they're kind of out there not knowing that anything is happening.
So I've got a question. Steve, is there anything in that number except, so there's the first part of your number one is continue exploring. Okay, the second part of that is essentially a recommendation not to sign non-disclosure agreements and to share information publicly.
It. At some point, if you're asking the public to vote and you've had input and the public has not had that input, they're making an incomplete, they're making a partially informed, if not uninformed decision
There's gonna,
on the issue that was discussed behind closed doors and which could have been perhaps quite important to potentially the long-term process.
but there's a lot of things in the process that if we do go ahead with that process, then it does become public knowledge before it goes to a vote.
Yeah.
Well, then that's when the edge,
Yeah.
Yeah.
and so, you know, there's a lot of things that will definitely come out and gives you time enough to do if we end up going to a vote or something that way. But when you're negotiating or doing anything, which God knows we aren't at the moment, it would be nice, you can't have the fox in the hen house.
Yeah.
Who they talking about?
I think that felt targeted.
If John's a fox, am I the hen or something?
I'm the old hen, the stewing chicken. So anyway, it's just one of those, it is,
Yeah.
that's where the dilemma comes in. 'Cause-
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Yeah, it is, you know, so.
Well, both sides do that. Both sides take counsel from their attorneys
Yeah.
to establish positions relative to negotiations, you know?
But I think
Sorry.
that's an important point to bring out through this process, that some people in the community, you know, there is that disclosure that you have to make. But yet at the same time, some in the community really would like to know what's going on, so that, you know, I think it's a important point to bring out for council to recognize that, and that we do have people that are interested in the process.
But
Right.
maybe I could characterize it this way. You got a needle and there's a yes or a no
Yeah.
kind of thing. And based on my questioning of a guy at Guzman, I said, based on your discussions with the city or your findings as you approach the city or whatever, does the needle point towards continued interest in this process, or does it really point towards it's really not worth our time, it's gonna cost too much, or it's the costs outweigh the benefits, or whatever decision there, that it's which way is the needle pointing would be helpful, if nothing more.
I think,
So, I mean, there's something like that can be discussed without, I think can be discussed without saying, and without divulging particulars. I could be wrong, but that's just a thought.
It really is a dilemma. I'm reassured by the fact that if there's ever anything big going to happen, it's going to be very public at that point, whether it's a vote to renew a franchise, a vote to municipalize, vote for anything related. It's a dilemma now. We really can't say a whole lot.
as far as that needle goes, yay or nay, yes or no, or whatever. I think the electorate. Such a small portion. Are willing to get involved and actually look into it. The only time they speak up is when their bills go up. After the fact.
So what we've got a third-party proposal presented to council in executive session that dealt with, you know, legal matters and negotiations and all of that kind of thing. And council,
Careful.
Yeah, no kidding.
was informed
Say what.
of what the proposal was and what the ramifications were, and instructed negotiators on the path. Because you can instruct, you can decide is kind of the horns of the dilemma to describe it. You can instruct your negotiators, you can't decide.
And anything that's decided will ultimately come to a public vote for city council.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
And I think it's important to say too, that at least some, and maybe most or all of us recognize that at points where something is gonna be voted on, the city, we need to make a really large effort for public education and information and so forth. I look back at the franchise election in 2020, that's like, what was that year? And there really, on the city side, there really wasn't much of an effort. There was money, you know, under campaign finance. Anyone who was spending money on that election had to file with the city clerk. The Black Hills filed, I think, an expenditure of around 50,000. The independent small issue committee, campaign committee, filed around 5,000 total, I think, expended. But in terms of any real good public information and discussion, it really wasn't anything. There wasn't a committee on the pro side of the renewal of the franchise to really have public meetings or anything. So it's just something to be aware of in the future, that we know that there should be more communication on that side of the issue when it ever comes to a vote.
Okay, so the question for the committee is, I believe that the first recommendation by Steve is covered by our 1 through 4. The second recommendation is for transparency, request for transparency, if I can characterize it as such. And
It's a little different. But Steve should speak.
Well, I guess I would say that there's my understanding, and I don't follow the legislation the way some folks do here. Understanding is that there was a suggestion to eliminate some expenditures from being tied to rates, as in that the public shouldn't have to pay for certain things. And I'm listing some of the things here. I'm echoing or supporting that position. And for the record, somebody mentioned earlier, could make this an appendix or attachment or something, and certainly I had no expectation that anything that I was recommending would show up in your document, but since I have been attending and making some recommendations, perhaps it could be a references in the text.
Because what we could do under ongoing, at maybe number 8, we could say something, gather input from local community. And then say, see appendix 2, or, whatever appendix it might be.
Index or attachment or whatever. you choose.
That way it shows that we're trying to see what the public, any input that we get from the public.
And frankly, if you put it that way, you don't have to decide yes or no in terms of
Right.
the merits and demerits of what I'm posing.
Yeah.
That it should or shouldn't be included as part of your
Your
recommendations.
comment rather than.
It's my
ours.
comment, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to endorse it or include any portion of it. Or reach any decision other than perhaps attaching it or not. I think your job is.
Can I ask though, I mean, Steve, a couple of things that you list here are not paid for by customers. And so if it's not accurate, should it be there?
No.
Well, it's in your FERC Form 1.
But it's not listed as a customer expense. It's not recoverable.
Which are you?
Talking specifically about civic, political, and related activities and general advertising. Neither of those are recoverable from customers.
I think safety advertising is the only thing that can be.
Each program like the 811 dig has its own advertising budget because they want to inform the public. Energy efficiency has its own advertising budget. Brand messaging is not recoverable from any customers.
I think.
And that's why it's done at an enterprise level, because it is a corporate expense.
Was that true for some?
Corporate expense is revenues. from whom?
Steve, it's not recoverable. It's not included as a revenue component as rates, so it's not recoverable. It is part of how the business is required to manage their business to earn their margin. That's where that comes from.
So my question remains, where does that money come from ultimately?
It comes
You
from
have-
it comes from shareholders because the revenue requirement is based on the ability to sort of cut the expenses for customers plus an allowable profit. The profit is what's driven by what you call below the line expenditures such as those.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I thought that was true, but I wasn't gonna, I didn't, it's been long enough, I didn't know things had changed or not.
Now, and what Steve references in legal expenses, that absolutely was part of the discussion of Senate Bill 291. That is actually something that's gonna go through the PUC rulemaking process. The idea of this interest rate, again, I'll just remind you all, that's what the PUC sees as single, what do they call it? Single subject rate making, and they won't do that. Now, if you are asking that they reconsider that, what you're asking for is a rate case. Which means that anything that we've invested at this point would then be included in that process. So
So in other
It just-
words, if you know you can get a lower interest rate, you're not gonna do it unless you're forced to.
no, that's not what I said. What I said is that's it. Your debt and equity is set as you go through that rate making process, and they won't single it out. The PUC has said they won't single it out and address that single issue.
Oh, I understand that the rate making process is what this all comes under. I don't.
I guess my point is just simply that if you're going to include them, I would hope that they would be more factual than what's presented here.
Amen. I agree with that. Everything that's put out there to the public or whatever needs to be absolutely factual.
So that it raises just a really broad general question about what can and what cannot be included in rates, and is there something that we as a committee or someone should put together kind of like currently what's allowed and maybe what 291 or Senate Bill 291 might potentially change depending on rulemaking. I think there's some lack of clarity there. And I look at the percentage on the loan, it's like, well, does Black Hills ever refinance a loan when they can get a better rate? Well, maybe the answer is, well, not unless somebody forces them to. And people are curious about where did the money come from that Black Hills spent on that election in the spring of 2020 in Pueblo, the smaller amount that was spent here in the fall of 2020. People would like to know where that money, since it is regulated.
I guess the answer to your question, Emily, would be, you've had contact with the UCA and with the PUC, and I can't spell out all that is in and outside of rate cases, and I think that they would, and what's gonna be under the PUC purview through this rulemaking process, and I would probably lean on them as the experts. They're the ones that, make those decisions.
Right, and I'll just make a brief general comment about the process, because I have sat in on some recent public comment hearings with the PUC, including one I think is recently last week that had to do, and it's another continuation of that hearing. I'm sure you're aware that both Black Hills and South are affected. And the public, just like with us, the public generally doesn't show up for all kinds of good reasons. They're working, they're busy, whatever. So what you have, like at the hearing I sat in on last week, and I didn't testify, as I already had previously, it was attorneys from the two major utilities arguing with the UCA people and the others and the hearing officer. And I don't see that changing. So it's not really serving the public very well. Just good to know that.
That's how things turn out. That just a little ditty here, or whatever. There's an organization with ditch companies called DARCA, Ditch and Reservoir Company Alliance. The very first meeting was held at a 4 Mile Community Club with Karen Rademacher. The purpose of it was for ditch companies' input and everything. It is turned into an organization that major cities and whatever come to.
Of course, they
Give
know where
every-
the water is.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
what I'm saying is the original intent of the committee is no longer there.
Hey, a couple of thoughts here. So. As, in term of Steve's recommendations, I think that his first one there, number 1, is covered by 1 through 4. I think the second one, could be phrased under our ongoing section that that council, given the requirements of section 1316, which is that in all rate cases initiated by utility companies holding franchise agreements with the city for the purpose of determining several things. That the city should determine those things, and if there's a trigger, then the city should intervene. I think that the recommendation should be that council consider a policy determination about when that should hold true for non-franchise utilities.
Yeah,
So in other words, what this section says
Oh, no.
is that if we have a franchise, we have direction on what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to look at rate cases. I think it says that in rate cases, in all rate cases, we're supposed to look at rate cases, determine if there's a trigger, and then intervene in those rate cases through hiring an attorney funded by 5% of that franchise fee withheld for that purpose. Okay, I'm saying the city should make a policy decision in the case of a non-franchise utility,
Which Black Hills. is
which Black
recommending.
Hills is, whether this should also be followed. Whether this process should also be followed.
And I think, yeah, I agree. I just think we need to figure out what the wording should be on that. And I mean, maybe, at the very least, the committee should recommend to council that with Black Hills, the electricity provider being such an important factor, that we should recommend that we intervene in Black Hills rate cases regardless.
And that's, and
So that's just something for the committee to consider, whether the committee would want to recommend specifically.
so I'm not sure that I agree that we should intervene in all rate cases.
The next one will be a big one.
Well,
Well, I'm
So-
joking partly,
so we
because we
have,
haven't had one for a while, so I'm thinking it's gonna be an important one.
so what our charter directs council to do right now is determine whether it's lawful, determine whether it's just, determine whether it's reasonable, determine whether it's prejudicial, determine whether it's preferential, and determine whether it's discriminatory.
And the council, I assume, would do that with the assistance of council, COU and SEL.
And so that is a filter that is applied to all rate cases. And then the question is whether you intervene or not. And the triggers for intervention are listed here, right?
I think council. I mean, we elected them to represent us. And we figured they were intelligent enough to do that dutifully. Yeah, I think the council should be the sole determiner of that. Whether they intervene or not.
Well, I think that they would
Well,
be, aside from what the code requires.
so what what we have here is my suggestion that we make a recommendation that council follow section 13.16 for non-franchise
Yeah.
holding utilities.
Although we do not have a franchise, we still follow what
We
the,
still recommend that we
what
follow
the
this.
charter says to follow.
And I'm good with that. I'm not good with a blanket intervene in all cases.
No.
Or whatever. This does require us to make some evaluation of a rate case, in all rate cases.
Yep.
Yeah.
So to me, that's the recommendation.
I agree.
That,
Go back.
Okay.
Let's go,
So-
number 5, let's just go through it and see what you want to add and what you want to take out of there.
so
It should comply with the current city code, is that okay?
Mhm.
well, hang on, hang on.
Okay.
So for number 5, it should be. So I'm just looking at the formula. So our recommendation is the city should make a policy decision about chapter 13.
Hold on.
Okay,
I don't do shorthand. City should make a policy decision.
concerning chapter 13.16 for non-utility, for utility non-franchise.
Or you could even, would it be even easier to just say, although the city is currently not under a franchise, we recommend following through with chapter 13.16.
So what I'm saying is not that we recommend that, this is up for discussion, but what my idea is to recommend that the city make a policy decision about whether to pursue intervention in utility cases, rate cases that are non-franchise utilities.
Okay, but that seems to me as if we're passing the buck as the committee, because this is to be making recommendations.
Gotcha.
And so our recommendation should be, we believe that the city should continue intervening where appropriate on rate cases, although we're unfranchised at the moment. It's kind of what I'm seeing.
But the issue is what is appropriate.
That's true.
That's up to council to decide.
So my point is that we have charter language that does trigger intervention.
Right.
The legal
We
just
have a
on those
code
things.
that says the city council shall cause the city to formally intervene, et cetera. Et cetera. So I'm confused about why we're trying to back off what's already in the code. And this is separate from the issue about
Sure.
franchise or not.
Sure.
And I think
Understand.
the committee then has the option of making a recommendation that could match what's in the code and just say, do this for the ones we don't have a franchise with.
Whether there is a franchise in place or not.
I mean, that's an option for the committee to decide that.
So there's two things. We're talking about the recommendation, but you brought up what code means essentially, Emily, is whether it requires for all cases intervention.
Well, the way it's worded, it sounds like it requires that if there's a franchise in place.
No.
Shall cause the city to formally intervene is the beginning phrase of 13-16-010. So what am I?
It's at the end.
For the purpose of determining.
But you've already formally intervened. It says you shall intervene and then look at the detail.
It says all rate cases,
Right.
but not just any case. Is that what?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the question is, shall cause a form, okay, the city council shall cause the city to formally intervene.
There you go.
In all rate cases by companies holding franchise agreement for the purpose of determining. So we have to intervene to determine these things, and then we have instructions later that if we have determined one of those conditions are met, to continue the actual formal intervention. Because unless it's met, unless one of those conditions are met, we're not authorized,
I'm comfortable with just letting the attorney interpret that.
well,
And just make a
So-
decision here about
Well,
whether we
the
want to
big
do
word
this.
is, franchise.
Yeah,
That's,
Right, in the code, yeah.
that's what we've got to get around. Because we still want to be able to intervene in a Black Hills rate case, although we are not franchised at the moment. It still affects us and the community.
and so what I think that this is. I think our recommendation is to council is to go back and look at this section. Understand what it means and consider a policy decision, whether this section should cover. Non-franchise utilities.
And that non-franchise, utility such as Black Hills currently is, then we should pursue something.
Well, so that's what. So the question is, what does this direct city to do? And there's differing opinions around the table about what this directs city to do. And so what I'm suggesting is that the city make a policy decision about whether this covers non-franchise utilities, which takes the city right into the center of what does this really mean?
Oh, I don't think we would recommend that council interpret this to include that. I'm saying that we would recommend that council may wish to intervene in rate cases for non-franchise entities. Not that this says that we need to. So, I mean, we
Yeah.
need to be careful how we word that.
Well,
Where's Amy when we?
so. So we have clear code direction, I believe. That we have in our code of when the city should intervene or should not intervene.
For
Yeah,
Franchise
it doesn't
utilities.
address what to do when you have an entity that has rate cases before the PUC, but is not franchised with the city. It doesn't address that.
Yeah.
So that's why I think this
Yeah.
committee has room to
Yeah.
make a recommendation about that.
So either franchise
but-
or not, non-franchise,
So here's what I
city
think,
has the option.
here's what I think the recommendation should be is that council should seek legal advice on what the implementation of 1316 means. Because I read it as that there are triggers, and unless you meet the triggers, you're not authorized to spend the money. There is, the council can always decide to intervene. But there are specific triggers here and specific.
And there's not
direction.
a revenue flow at the moment to cover the cost.
yeah, right.
And so that's why we need the exception to the rules, so to speak.
And to make sure we
Yeah.
understand the rules.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so to me, that's the recommendation,
That's,
so that the council understand what this means. And that our recommendation would be to apply this section to utility companies not holding the franchise. And maybe we want to say widespread,
Yeah.
who have a significant number of customers. Because what's a utility, I mean,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know,
Well, the utility, the definition of utility is the one is used by the state statute, which is.
Yeah.
It's the gas, electric, does not include
Communication.
internet or communication.
those communications. Okay, I'm good with that then. The same, a non-franchise holding utility. Or however we want to phrase that. Do you have, yes, is
Well,
it as clear as mud?
Let me just bring, because I liked how you put that earlier. The city should make a policy decision concerning chapter 13.6. For 13.16, yes. For non-franchise utilities such, and then I added such as Black Hills Electric.
Sure, I'm good with that.
And then,
We used to try to turn the sucker off.
then what did you want to add to the rest of it?
So. The, I think that that's something that would satisfy perhaps both Emily and myself, is to say that the city should seek legal advice and clarification of this.
In other words, can we go ahead and do it? Even though we're,
Not necessarily, but what does this obligate us to do? What are our obligations?
okay,
Not what's the potential field of council action, because that's really open. I mean, that's really open, but this does impose obligations. What are the obligations imposed by this section? Does that sound good?
Yeah, I mean, it's been in our code for decades, so I'm not particularly concerned about what it means. But I like.
Disagree.
I think we basically need to have an understanding that if we feel that this is a case, meets one of those things, that we're gonna go ahead and do it, even though we don't have
Yeah,
revenue stream
Right.
through a franchise. So that, however we say it, that's what we're trying to get at.
What if I do something like the city should make a policy decision concerning 13.16 for non-franchised utilities such as Black Hills currently it is. The city should seek legal advice on how to handle
And I-
non-franchised utilities.
Or you could just say a kind of a comma after that first part and just say acknowledging that the franchise fee revenue stream does not exist for a non-franchise utility. Or, acknowledging that the revenue stream, the franchise fee revenue stream that might be used for this would not be in place for a non-franchise utility.
We'll just say non-franchised utilities.
Yeah, I wouldn't even necessarily be specific with the use of Black Hills.
Right.
'Cause
Do not require or do not receive a revenues. I'll have to just play around with
through a,
rather than acknowledging, I would say considering. I mean, we can acknowledge it without taking action, Consider.
put something down and I'm sure we can.
yeah,
There'll be discussion, right?
yeah. That red pen will come out so quick.
That's okay. That's what they're for. You want that to replace them 5? Is that the understanding? Under on.
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
Okay, I'll take a stab at it.
On 6 and 7, my only things are just little minor wording things.
What you got?
Oh, just to kind of follow what we've done on the others where we think the city should. Maybe
Okay,
just add that to something like that to 6, and then on
Okay.
7. I guess we should clarify who should investigate.
yeah.
so. With that in mind, shouldn't 1, 3, 4, and 5 go up under further research and study? Because the ongoing assistance of the Energy Committee is the committee. Unless we intend to recommend that the committee should explore potential avenues which could result in more electricity. So
I didn't follow you on that, John. Can you
So-
say it differently?
I'll try. So we have a section called ongoing assistance of the energy. So this is where we think the Energy Committee can play a role. Okay. So we're not the city. And so when we say the city should continue unless we want to change that, say, the energy committee should continue. Those city should go up in further research and study.
So you're talking about number 3 now.
Uh-huh.
3, 4, 5,
Didn't you say 1, 3, 4, and 5?
1, 3, 4.
One already says committed, right?
Yeah,
That's it. That says the city's energy franchise committee.
yeah, so 3 probably should too.
And you're saying move those to further research and study?
So not 1. That's correct. not
Leave that
one.
there.
Yeah, but 3, 4, and 5.
3, 4, and
Okay.
5.
Yeah, should be moved up to further research and study. Because those are our recommendations for the city. So we have 1 and 2 saying what the energy committee, the role, what we think the energy committee can play going forward. And then we have 6 and 7, which is kind of a mix of
That's
that,
it, yeah.
kind of a mix. And so the question is, should this be something the city does, or is this something that we think the energy committee should do? And we're just wordsmithing this, and
Mhm.
we may not get done today, but
Oh, we're just about that.
just about. Okay, so is number 6 a city thing or an energy committee?
I would say energy committee thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Communicate and collaborate.
yeah, but you also could get the door wider open if we had a city representative do the initial. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I don't know. I mean, I can call and say I'm a council person, but I shouldn't. I have to say I am a member of the energy committee, and I'm not sure what,
So that,
oomph I would have representing it that way, as opposed, and I don't mean to put more, I'm just using this as an example. The city administrator calling the other city administrator in whatever town and say, hey, I would like to have so-and-so from our energy committee get in touch with you. So get the introduction is basically, and then find out if there's who we should talk to.
so.
That would be a process, but I'm thinking that would have more empathy, have more impact.
Joint effort is
So-
what you're saying.
Yeah, joint effort,
So-
good point.
So what is choking me up about this is saying the committee should communicate and collaborate with other communities. And really, that's not the recommendation, I think, on point, based on what you just said. Really, the recommendation, I think, would be to consider having the city administrator see if there's collaboration and communication channels that should be established with other Black Hills.
Yeah, and it might not even be the city administrator, but it would
City
be,
staff.
it would be city staff,
The
yeah,
city, so it should be the city.
I think so.
So the city, so this goes up into the first section. The city should.
Oh, I see, yeah, under recommend, okay. Yeah, just to get the door open and go, yeah,
Yeah. The issue that's hanging me up was us collaborating with other cities going there, saying,
Yeah.
hey, we're here
Yeah.
representing
Yeah.
Union City.
Yeah.
We're gonna collaborate with you to talk about.
Well, and you need to be collaborating with the right people in
Right.
those
It's
communities
true,
Yeah.
as
it's
well.
true. So that's a city recommendation.
Okay, I get that.
Okay, investigate the possibility of grants other programs. And so is that us or is that the city?
Well, ultimately, the city would have, the discretion over any such grant, so it should be the city.
So,
yeah.
I mean, we don't have any way of administering a grant or anything like that.
so my question is, Mr. Administrator, are we already doing that?
We are always looking for grants. But I don't know specifically. I mean, we can put this on a list of targets for our grant manager.
Oh, well, that would be a great recommendation then, is ensure the city should ensure the grant manager is aware of energy and related grants,
Yeah.
whatever, and
Section 1.
that would be a section 1.
What were you gonna say, Emily?
So. Then looking at 1 and 2 and ongoing, you're good, you got everything captured, you need to capture?
I think so.
Okay, then looking at 1 and 2 and ongoing assistance, the franchise committee. The franchise committee should not be dissolved at this time, while the city is still exploring options for more affordable power. I'm good with that recommendation. It's a question of dissolution or not. Well, don't dissolve us yet. You know, regular meetings should be paused. When appropriate, and the committee's research and advice should continue to be utilized in line with the resolution established by the committee. And so. I've kind of got my city council hat on here. What I think the recommendation of the committee should be is that we should recommend to council that they reevaluate the resolution and determine what future role they would like the committee to play.
Instead of or in addition to this number 1.
So I'm good with the first sentence. Regular meetings paused. And rather than say the research and advice should continue to be utilized in line with the resolution, but the city council should determine what role the energy committee should play in any future activities.
Okay,
I would word that differently.
yeah,
Okay,
mainly because we should provide the recommendation to them as, to
what that role should be.
what that role should be.
Mhm.
So,
So, but we've. Okay,
Well, really, and I got this from what we were talking at the last meeting, Ryan, the Energy Franchise Committee should continue to assist the city to research. Number 2, evaluate and make recommendation on electric options and issues, publicity, education, focus groups, legislation, as well as PUC rate cases and studies. So
Bayou
that's,
Fox,
in essence, that would be one of our recommendations, maybe for what the function of the energy committee would be, in addition to giving the options like of looking at the different energy options. So I look at number 2 as like a recommendation of what we could foresee that the energy committee could help the city out with.
sure.
Right, and so with that, 1 and 2, I think the wording's good as is. We could add a little phrase in there about urging the council to look at the wording of the resolution or whatever, but that sort of implies that the committee's saying something without saying anything. I'd like to just leave it.
so the,
Mhm.
my feeling is that the future of the committee should be one as when called upon. Okay, rather than a continuing effort, because all the number 2 says we keep meeting. We keep our monthly
I
meetings.
don't think it says that. To me, it doesn't.
I think we need to come to an agreement, and I think it's as needed, or, and it's kind of like, it might not necessarily be you, John, saying we need to meet. It might say, hey, this has come up, or Emily sat in on something, so we need to maybe meet next meeting date or something that way, but.
Or an example that just pops in my head is when the PUC gets to its rulemaking on this new Senate bill, that might be something that the city would want input on, and the committee is the logical one to kind of
Yeah,
look into the detail of what might be proposed as new rules.
yeah, and we may even want to be sitting in on those PUC discussions, and we may even want to put some input in or something too at the time.
I believe the hearing officers, when they say, which they have multiple times, that they really want to hear from the public on these things. Because all they hear from are the attorneys paid
Yeah.
for by
Yeah.
these big utilities, that's all they get.
Mhm.
And
Action groups.
they don't
No.
get anything.
Oh.
Boy, It's, I mean, Pueblo hasn't had anybody testifying in most of this. And you think that it's still some. Anyway.
I think another important component to that is just what would be helpful for staff. I mean, how can the committee be doing some things for staff that
Yeah.
gives them assistance, maybe gives them a buffer, if you may? You know, what's beneficial to help out staff, you know, some of the different things.
Right,
Yeah, and I think, you know, when we get into these additional reports and analyses, that, I can see that being a role for the committee to help with.
Yeah, it just with the
Interpret
grant
those
writing and
things, yeah.
stuff, you know, as
Right.
to
Exactly.
saying this is kind of how we'd like to find some money to pay for, you know, and, you know, that way it's kind of like somebody can definitely, obviously our wordsmithing is pathetic, but if we give them the thought behind it, we could, that's why you've got somebody. You know me, I just,
I know. Go for it, Ken.
yeah, but I'm just saying, we could obviously say what we're trying to go for and
Yeah, well,
stuff.
there's certain ways that some things need to be phrased. you know,
Yeah,
in order to
exactly.
Get the attention of
But how
whoever's
can we
reading it.
be beneficial to
Yeah,
staff?
Yeah,
to-
absolutely, yeah.
That they look at this as it's a value added component,
Right,
that we're adding value to the city and possibly saving the city money
right.
because of what we're able to
And
do.
for staff to not be afraid to reach out to us is.
Yeah, right. Well, and not for them to be going down rabbit holes where they don't need to be going to be more productive, to.
Well, what would help staff out?
Yeah,
That's just,
right,
that's
right,
it.
I've
yeah.
been in that position before,
Mhm.
being a staff person and it's just always very beneficial to
Yeah.
right.
talk to staff and see what really is gonna help you out the most,
Mhm.
Mhm.
you know? Cause he's doing that, eat, sleep and drink this stuff, so, you know, he knows different things that might be beneficial to the staff. That's just my 2 cents.
It's more like five. but that's okay.
So,
I think.
I think we're ready for a next draft. What do you think? I mean, I think,
this looks really good. I mean,
yeah,
I guess the last thing as far as putting another draft together to discuss, what do we want to do with the recommendations that Steve had? Do we want to,
I think we better be careful, just because there is some discussion as to what
Yeah.
is and isn't accepted, so we better make sure. You know, as far as the legal. We sort of got Black Hills agreement, but yeah, that's something that is being addressed, but. I have to admit, Steve, I had always been told too, that the only advertising that was ever rate-based was safety-minded. And
I got some suggestions. How about you and I talk after this and maybe I can modify the wording.
okay, but I'm not sure we even want to go that far at this stage. I know you probably want us to though,
I
right?
know, people keep assuming what I want.
But no, I think it's one of those,
I think we could look at this in terms of what the new legislation might accomplish or might have the potential.
yeah, I think maybe it's one of those to where maybe, well, and if we wait until August, we might have some more specific stuff by the time we actually do this August 9th. But I
Mhm.
think I'd be pretty leery about, not that I don't agree with the thought process and
Right.
stuff, but I think as far as, just like Doug has said, we damn well want to make sure that we're not putting out false info or,
Well, I'm not saying it's your false info either.
No.
I've read some of this stuff other places too.
The facts are the facts. The question
Right.
is where the words revenue versus the words
Well,
rates and riders,
well.
they apply here.
mhm.
It comes from customer revenue.
Revenue, there's
It
no
does
doubt.
not come
It is.
necessarily, it does come from customer revenue.
Right.
Absolutely,
Right.
Yeah.
because nobody's.
So
donating
so the
this.
wording could be changed to deal
the
with
thing
that.
is that we gotta realize that we're dealing with a council that has not had the opportunity to absorb this.
Mhm.
And look at this from 14,000 different ways. So we gotta make it as simple. As a council person, make it simple for us.
Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying, as
Yeah.
far as making sure we don't leave any ambiguity to be interpreted that way.
So
Don't
I,
ask me to spell it.
what I think the recommendation is, I think that we don't attach Steve's recommendations as an appendix, but that we sharpen one of our recommendations under ongoing assistance to capture the idea of the committee following the PUC, following the process initiated by the legislature.
Yeah, monitoring and
Under number 2 on that ongoing assistance,
Yeah.
could you just flesh that out a little bit more, perhaps? No? Oh, well, okay, just leave it very general. Legislation, you know,
Well, no, we do need to be specific that there is
Right.
this legislation that has been passed and that the committee should,
legislation and updates on regulations or rulemaking.
well, those are general things. This is the
No.
specific thing.
Okay.
And I'm talking about the
yeah,
specific.
because as a prime example, if we didn't have this committee and hadn't been following it, we probably wouldn't know what the legislation even did as far as telling the PUC to, so I'm kind of giving us a pat on the back in a sense for, because if we didn't exist, we wouldn't even have a clue and how it really can affect what our citizens are paying.
Is there a
Does that
phone
make
number
sense?
that, with that?
Well, it's.
291?
Yeah,
It's law.
Bill 23-290,
23
and it's now enacted.
Dash 291.
It's a Senate.
Senate bill.
Mhm.
Must be,
But now it's codified as.
Yeah.
But that's all right. That's how I like to refer to it as that because,
Can we just go ahead and refer to that in this document?
Yes,
That's-
sure,
Put
absolutely.
that as number
Yeah.
3.
yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
So did we say earlier on a slightly different subject, did we say earlier we were going to add a number 8 about ongoing gathering of input from the public or something, or did we decide that was?
I just like that. I don't know. Do you want to include something like that?
I think we don't really have it anywhere else, and I do
No.
think it's an important thing that the city likes to do when they remember to do it.
Well, and under that, okay, I'm just going to put this out, under that. Information, perhaps from someone who knows more about, the effect of the high energy rates on economic development within our community. That's pretty general, but I think, I think that might be useful to have some actual numbers, but to,
So what's the recommendation? Is this?
well, this isn't under this, this is, well, that's, could be under that, but it would be like a topic at one of our meetings or something. I'm just,
Well, but so if we wanted
That would be maybe more of a city thing as far as the city to analyze the economic development
well,
yeah, I
impact.
was thinking that's more Rick's.
officials.
well,
Add
tell you
official.
what, here's what I think we should do. We're already past our time.
Yeah.
I think what we should do is just come to a conclusion today. Or do the best you can, and we'll have another discussion next
Okay.
time.
Yeah,
How's that?
we'll narrow
So
it
there is
down.
a next time.
So there will be a next time.
All right.
Next time, or do we want?
The next meeting is scheduled for June 12th. 10 to noon.
That regional infrastructure summit is.
Oh, you're right.
Oh,
And then the meeting after that, June 26th, council will be at the Colorado Municipal League Conference.
Well,
So can we fit something like a different special day would work for this group or not? Or whatever would work.
like split the difference and go to
I don't know
19
if
maybe
that
or
worked
something.
for-
Why don't we pick a couple dates and let us get back to John, what would work for,
What it rates.
because I'm not so tech-minded as you
Yeah.
guys for calendar on my phone. I have to go home and look those. Jot it down.
Well, do people generally have a good day? Fridays are generally good for me.
Fridays are good. Monday, the 19th of June Well, of course, it's already the 22nd, so it's like, that would work for me, but it's.
This isn't gonna take long to put this all
No.
together.
You just
Well,
make
so
it a
that's-
short.
It won't.
If we said,
We're just taking some of this information here and rearranging it a little bit and making a few revisions and
Yeah.
it won't take that long. I liked having the extra time this other time so I could look at 5 different thought patterns and try to make them into one.
Yeah. Friday works for me too, except for the second.
Yeah,
It's
I
great.
have
We're gonna be
conflicts.
in,
well, what,
is Friday?
what kind of
good for you?
availability do you have, Brian?
Yeah, I guess we should ask that.
I would like to know.
The tech.
Yeah.
Mostly Friday mornings I have booked. So I have staff meetings, at one-on-ones on
What-
Friday mornings.
So what about if we, all right, today's the
Is
22nd.
there a Tuesday that will-
What about June 5th?
June.
What does June 5th look like for you?
Yeah,
Oh, you said there was the
June
conference or
5th would
something
work.
that day?
I don't know why, I've got, somebody sent me a thing saying we have something on June, have the energy
I
committee on
know,
June.
I think
I
we
don't
have
know.
calendar problems.
Yeah, we do, but I've got it in here, so.
I know.
Hopefully, once Microsoft 365 is implemented,
Right.
those calendar problems go
Oh,
away. June 5th would work.
Okay,
So we
that.
put that
that's Monday,
Some
Monday.
Monday.
Monday, June
two
5th.
weeks from
So at 10?
Probably should be on.
Well, so it's tentative. Let me know if you can't.
Okay.
6:5, you said,
Yeah.
again to 12.
But he should be okay by the fifth. Unless. Well, I'm not going back to Denver, have her closed off, I'm just not doing it. For 5 minutes.
Okay, so we're tentative on the 5th
What hell?
and we'll go from there.
I've done it all.
Oh, good.
Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.